My guest today is Amnesty International Country Director for Nigeria, Mrs. Osai Ojigho. Welcome to SaharaTV. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
First question I'd like to ask you is, what do you perceive is the current state of human rights in Nigeria today?
Wow, that's a very loaded question. The state of human rights in Nigeria is very fluid. We're experiencing a period where rights are systematically being abused, where people's lives and properties are not secured, where people are struggling to find their voice, to be able to complain even when these violations occur. But at certain times, we're also seeing a situation where when people have come together, like for example, a community coming together to demand their rights from the authorities, they have been heard and they've gotten very successful judgments. But then implementation becomes another issue. And this is the main issue facing human rights in Nigeria: implementation of decisions, as well as following through when complaints are made about violations. So we're facing a period of poor accountability and, in certain cases, impunity.
We find that Nigerians at some point late of last year started a campaign, NSAS campaigns, to protest against impunity by officers of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad unit. And we know that the government did very little to tackle that issue. What do you have to say as regards the matter?
NSAS is a campaign that actually started a few years ago. And Amnesty International Nigeria also released a report in 2016 talking about the abuses being committed by this specialized arm of the Nigerian police force. And a lot has not changed since that report was released and since people have been complaining about it. It was good that there was some attention drawn to it again, unfortunately due to circumstances of another young person's life being taken away by one of these SARS operatives. And of course, the police response was, we're going to reorganize the unit, we're going to ensure that they are complying with all international and national standards. But this is something they've said over and over again. So Nigerians should stand together to demand for adequate access, adequate resources to ensuring that this kind of impunity going on within SARS is stopped. And it can only happen if they can identify those who have been committing these crimes. Because like we've consistently said, they know the bad eggs. They know those who have been involved. There seems to be some sort of silence, and also people don't want to speak out, as in the victims and the victims' families. Those that survive are grateful to be alive, and they are not willing to pursue their cases because they believe they will not be heard. And so the police has to do a lot more to ensure those that complain are given anonymity. They are able to share their experiences without intimidation, and the police can carry out the investigation to ensure those that are responsible are brought to book. Until that is done, we would continue to see these situations repeat itself within Nigeria.
Amnesty International released a report, has released series of documented reports from rights abuse relating to security forces continue to commit serious human rights violations. Has there been any positive reforms, positive responses from the government towards some of the reports that Amnesty International has released?
The government has always been kept abreast of our reports. We make sure they get copies. We inform them when we receive preliminary investigation findings. And the one thing that I can say the government has positively acted on is Amnesty's international request that these allegations of violations by security agencies, particularly the military, are investigated. Last year, a presidential investigative panel was set up, and this panel, for the first time in a very long time, went across the different geopolitical zones in Nigeria, meeting with Nigerians, meeting with people who have had some sort of engagement with military interventions in their region, held public hearings, and invited memorandum from various members of the society, including civil society. And this is one concrete step, at least, which the government has taken. The next question we have now, what are they going to do with the findings of this public hearing? Are we going to see a change in the way the military conduct their affairs? Will they insist that security agents abide by international respectable standards of carrying out policing in the country and ensuring life and security in the country? So a lot more we'll be expecting now that the panel has concluded its public hearings, and we hope the government would release the reports in public and ensure that we can engage with it and see also going forward what security agents would be doing differently from 2018.
Still on human rights abuses, ever since the disappearance of IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu, Amnesty International is yet to do a report or to tell us what they are doing about his situation. Is that not something that Amnesty should consider serious?
Amnesty considers every human rights violation serious. We monitor the process that is happening across the country. In this particular case, we are still carrying out our research. And this is one thing that often people don't understand, because we need to make sure all the information we have, we've checked it, we've verified it, we're able to meet with victims in a secure environment. Sometimes that takes a bit of time. Also, people are traumatized by the experience. There have been some witnesses that have indicated interest to speak with us, but are not yet ready psychologically to do so. But that has not stopped us from compiling the information. This is one research that we're still, that a lot of work is still going on at the moment. And when the time is right, we'll be able to release the findings of our investigations.
Are there particular groups inside Nigeria that you feel are more vulnerable to human rights abuses than others?
That would be the poor. Because the poor already are disadvantaged as a result of their status in society. And they are vulnerable because people take advantage of them because they believe they don't have a voice. And often when you hear of violations that have not been seen through, it's because they do not have the resources financially, for example, to pay for a lawyer to sue whoever has violated their rights. Or in a case where they've been accused of a crime, they do not have the means to defend themselves. And so we need to do a lot more to ensure we have legal aid available for people who cannot afford legal services, and ensure they to have an equal opportunity within the law.
How does Amnesty International view what is going on in Benue State and, Taraba with the Herdsmen killings?
The New Year Day killings in Benue State really shocked everyone. And this was something that resonated globally as well, because we did not expect that kind of situation to happen at the time it did, considering people are returning back from the holidays, but also the escalation of the violence we saw in that particular area. We have been monitoring the herdsmen farmers intercommunal violence for the last 2-3 years and documenting research in terms of what has been happening in at least 17 states in Nigeria. And Benue State was in a level that we had not seen in a very long time. It seemed it was very organized, it was systematic, and the intention of those who were involved in that was to inflict the biggest and violence as much as possible. And we believe this has happened because we've not done anything significant to stop it. When people have had incidents like this in the past, they've not been addressed completely. Oftentimes, we see short-term responses. Police are deployed in the area, or military in some cases. People make complaints. People would even identify people in the community they think are involved, or people who have passed through. And investigations go cold. And so we see there's a lot of reprisals, a lot of revenge attacks. And now what we're experiencing is a period where we're going very close to anarchy, where people can take the law into their hands in order to settle scores. And so the answer would be, if we don't want to see this kind of violence happening again, to ensure urgently we can have some sort of peaceful means, getting all sides involved in these communal clashes to discuss an amicable settlement to addressing issues which is affecting both communities. and also to ensure that security agents can act efficiently, promptly, and in a manner that is not excessive.
Do you think that the killings are as a result of grazing in northern states?
The killings are as a result of a fight for resources, access to resources. If you look at both communities that have been involved in this sort of clash, one needs vegetation, water in order for the cattle to feed. The other also needs land and water in order to plant crops and in order to harvest these crops at harvest time. Over time, populations have expanded around the areas which the nomadic communities have often moved their cattle across the country, and this goes beyond Nigeria, across the entire Sahelian West African region. And then population has increased. Farmlands are also now being used to produce crops that people in those communities are known for. We've seen a situation of changes in the climate changes also in environmental factors, drought. And so it means the resources that were available 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years ago are not the same today. So whenever there are limited resources, people are going to fight in order to ensure they get the first access or the best access to them. And until we recognize these underlying factors and address it, we would only be dealing with it in terms of a disagreement between one community and the other.
In the context of human rights, in addition to monitors, is there anything else that needs to be done, and by whom?
We all need to take a personal responsibility to talk about rights and speak about rights. Oftentimes, we act as bystanders whenever people's rights are being violated. Part of it is understanding what human rights are in the first instance. And we can do this by engaging, by learning, by finding out information. There are many resources online on the Amnesty International pages, but also from different sources within our community. But the most important thing is if we do not act, then these abuses will continue, and we all have a personal, individual responsibility to speak out.
What do you view as the biggest challenge of Nigeria ahead of the presidential elections in 2019?
I think that the biggest challenge would be how we're able to manage freedom of expression, how people share their opinions, whether online or offline, and how people respect others when they hold positions different from them. As we have seen in the last 2 years, there's been also an increase, a sort of, will I say, sensitivity about comments made by people who do not hold the same views as you do. And where people are in positions of power, there's a tendency to try to curb or limit the use of freedom of expression. So ahead of Nigeria's elections, we anticipate that a lot more people will be voicing their opinions, and we want a situation where people can respect those opinions. And the people making the opinions also do so within the limits of the law. And this is one area that I think would be of interest not only to the media, but to everyone else who is interested in having a better world for themselves and for their country.
Your organization did condemn the arrest of 10 Cameroonian activists in Nigeria. What's the perspective on Nigerian's government handling the situation so far?
So far, the government hasn't responded clearly in terms of how these arrests were made and who the 10 Cameroonian activists are. But our position is clear. The 10 people that were arrested from southern Cameroon are activists who have been residing legally in this country. Some of them are permanent residents. Some of them were granted political asylum. A few of them are refugees. Many of them are conducting themselves legally. Some have employment within Nigeria. And so it needs to be clear as to why they were arrested. Even under the principles of natural justice, even under Nigeria's constitution, when you are arrested, you need to know why you are being arrested and where you are being taken to. You need to have access to your lawyers, access to your family. It is not clear how this has been provided by the government or the reasons why they were arrested in the first place. The only thing that unites them together is because they are activists in southern Cameroon who are asking for a right to self-determination in their country. And when you have people gathering to discuss an issue, that means you're also recognizing their right to assemble, their right to associate with whoever they wish to associate with. As long as these people are not committing a crime, they should not have been arrested in the first place. And our concern is because of the uniqueness of this situation. If in fact there is a request by the Cameroonian authorities for these persons to be handed over to them, there is a bigger risk of them being subjected to torture, as well as their rights to fair hearing being affected. And these concerns are due to recent happenings in Cameroon itself. In July 2017, we released a report concerning the torture chambers in Cameroon. These are still very fresh. And under Cameroonian law, if you have been accused of any act that would impede national security, it is the military courts that have jurisdiction to hear those cases. There are no guarantees that that court would respect international human rights law and offer those who are appearing before it the protection of natural justice. So it means even if it's true that a request has been made by the Cameroonian authorities, Nigeria has to ensure that in handing over those people, that they will not be subjected to torture or any human rights abuses. If Nigeria is not convinced, or if there's evidence to show that there's a likelihood that they could suffer human rights abuses, then Nigeria should not release them or hand them over to those authorities until those situations can be proven otherwise. And most importantly, for those who have been given asylum or refugee status in the country, Nigeria has a responsibility to protect them. And so in this particular instance, it seems like there's a lot more the Nigerian government needs to put in place to ensure it does not add an extra layer of complexity to the issues already happening in neighboring Cameroon.
What's your assessment of the criminal justice system in Nigeria?
The criminal justice system in Nigeria needs a overhaul. This is something we've been talking about for several years. There have been so many justice sector reforms, but I think we need to now find a holistic response to this. It means not tackling just one aspect. There's been an overemphasis on the police because also they tend to be the first point of contact that people meet. But we need to look at the judiciary. We need to look at how our prosecutors being trained, how many do we have that can engage and ensure these cases are moving very quickly. We need to deal with the issues of the prisons. How are they being equipped? Are prisons available to deal with modern day demands? And look at how everyone engaging with the process is getting access. And of course, deal with corruption within the system as well. So for change to happen in our criminal justice system, we need to do more than tackling one issue. It needs to be a holistic approach.